Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Jake Ziegler, and I'm here with Brad Garoon. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. Today, we're covering the year 1937, and let's kick it off with that year's Best Picture winner, and the movie I assigned for Brad. It's called The Life of Emile Zola. Brad, I assigned this movie for you because it is the Best Picture winner, and I've assigned quite a few of those to you, and it's a movie that I hadn't seen in quite a while, and I think there are some kind of interesting things about it, both as a movie and both as, some of the behind-the-scenes elements of it that I think would be interesting for us to talk about. So before we talk more about the plot and some of these other things about it, tell me first, what were your initial impressions of the movie?
Well, I'm so excited to learn the behind-the-scenes things because I don't know them, and I have thoughts about problems with this movie.
Yeah.
I'll say, first off, overall, I think I liked it. More, I saw your Letterboxd review, and I think it's very good. I think it's very accurate. More towards the end than in the beginning. I think the beginning is a mess, and it's long for what it is. And it's, I think, a little bit cowardly, given the very heavy and important subject matter that it's dealing with. I think it skirts around a lot of what it actually wants to talk about, and I don't think it's well acted. But having said all of that, I have always been really interested in the Dreyfus Affair. One of the earliest movies was about the Dreyfus Affair. And I think, and I've seen that, and it is better than this, I think. Now, granted, it didn't have the weight of being a sound film or a feature-length film. Oddly, Roman Polanski has also tackled this subject matter. I have not seen that because it's post-exile Polanski, and most of that stuff sucks. But I'm now I really do want to check it out.
What movie is it that he tackled it in?
Yeah, it's with the guy from The Artist. It's called An Officer and a Spy. It came out in 2019.
Interesting. I don't even remember hearing about it.
You probably didn't, because who hears about what Polanski's doing anymore?
That is an excellent point.
So the Dreyfus Affair is really important. It was this major turning point in France where France's anti-Semitism was really put on display for the world. Alfred Dreyfus was a French general or commander of some kind who was accused of treason, spying for the Prussian army, giving them secrets of the French military. He was accused. He was found guilty. He spent 5 years on Devil's Island, which was like a brutal work camp, I think off the coast of South America. And the French military knew from the beginning that he was not guilty. He was scapegoated to avoid French embarrassment because he was Jewish, and he knew that it would just be like hot meat for the French public to say that a Jewish soldier was a traitor. They very quickly found out who the actual traitor was, and in a stunning move, acquitted him in a trial of his own. They rather had a spy in their ranks knowingly than admit that they had sentenced the wrong man to prison. It's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating chapter in history. And yet this movie is called The Life of Emile Zola, and it has to back that up somehow. So we get 30 minutes of the famed writer Emile Zola, who wrote the very famous J'accuse. And if you ever hear in a sitcom or something, someone say, J'accuse! This is what they're referring to. It's a letter he wrote in the press accusing the French military of wrongdoing in this case. So we get the first 30 minutes are like his life, where he decides he wants to be like a real for deal gritty writer. He meets a prostitute who's running from the police. He writes about her life and he becomes famous. He's obviously like a left-wing shit stirrer. And then the movie isn't about that. The movie is actually about the Dreyfus Affair. And it becomes very clear that the movie wants to just be about the Dreyfus Affair and how Zola influenced it. But we had to spend all this time with Zola early on in stuff that has nothing to do with anything. So I would love to know, why did this happen?
Well, that was one of the things that like the producers thought about, or is that there were different titles that they wanted to have for the movie, and why they ended up landing on that, I'm not exactly sure. But I think one of the major things about it that they needed to kind of pad this out is that Hollywood producers they had agreed not to piss off Hitler and say anything bad about Nazis or what they were doing over there, and basically not to even acknowledge that this character was basically that he was Jewish. I don't think they never said the word Jew, barely even acknowledged that he was Jewish. The anti-Semitism was not talked about at all. That was not a part of it. And I think it's really hard to do a movie on the Dreyfus Affair without that being a major part of the story. So I feel like they kind of had to pad the story with this Life of Emile Zola stuff, because there was just so much of the Alfred Dreyfus story that they couldn't tell because they don't want to piss off Hitler of all people. And this is 1937 when the movie came out. So, I mean, they were probably filming in 36 or whatever. Just a shocking to read that, and to think that there was ever a time where it was like, oh yeah, we better not piss off Hitler is just kind of hard to fathom.
Right. I mean, we're still 3 years away from Hitler invading Poland. And at the time, he's just antagonizing German Jews and German Romani and German homosexuals and German disabled people. Like, really, like those are the people that he's after. So what was it? It was just like to get German distribution. Is it like, the reason we don't say anything bad about China ever now? I mean, I guess now it doesn't matter because China doesn't take our movies anymore. But
I couldn't get a good answer. I mean, I looked at the Wikipedia page, whatever. I mean, I'm not super knowledgeable about it, but I mean, there really wasn't a good answer. It was just basically that they had agreed, basically that just they'd agreed not to, so something. And then Jack Warner went along with it for this movie. He's like, yep, we're gonna, do that. Jack Warner agreed, said we'll take the word Jew out of the script entirely. There was this guy named George Gisling. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but he was the German consul to the United States, and he wanted all the references to Jew to be out of it, and Jack Warner said okay.
Right. There's literally one reference to Jew in the whole movie. It's when they're trying to decide who to pin this on, and they look at Dreyfus's bio, and it says religion Jew, and they don't even really point at it, but that flashes on the screen for maybe a second, and then they say, "How did he become an officer?"
Like, you'd almost have to know. You'd almost have to know he was Jewish to even see that.
I found that whole portion of the movie quite confusing. And after Dreyfus is sent to Devil's Island, I rewound and went back and looked at it. And I'm like, wait, who is Esterhazy? Or how is Esterhazy involved here? And that was when I noticed it. And of course, I know that the whole thing is that this was a big embarrassing blight for France and their anti-Semitism. Incredible. So also it's worth noting, this takes place at the end of the 17th century. Or sorry, the 19th, end of the 19th century.
19th, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was very frustrated by that. That being said, once this becomes a courtroom drama, actually, that's not where it gets good. Where it gets good is when Zola, played by
Paul
Mooney, recites his J'accuse letter that's going to be in the newspaper. I was like, ooh, this is quite stirring. I actually like this quite a bit. And then it becomes a courtroom drama, which is interesting because Zola has written this letter. He writes the letter so he will be accused of slander and libel. And then predictably, he gets hauled into court and has to defend himself. And his defense is just brutally handicapped by the court.
The judge,
military
didn't do anything. Yeah,
nothing. Between the judge and the military, they are not allowed to talk about the Dreyfus affair because that's not what this is about. But of course, it is. It's wild. There's not a ton of A to B, where the tide turns. The tide just sort of does turn against the French military, mostly because there's a whistleblower eventually. And then all of a sudden, kind of like Due Machina, there's a new person in charge of the French military, and he cares. But yeah, I thought it was all right. I gave it 3.5 stars. We're batching these episodes. You can probably tell from my clothes if you're watching this on YouTube. we're batching these episodes, and this was the movie I saved for last because I couldn't get myself hyped up to watch it. And in hindsight, it probably should have been Phantom of the Opera at the end and not this.
Yeah, I do think I said it in my letterbox. There's a good movie in here to be told. I mean, in the Dreyfus affair, I mean, how can you not make a compelling, really engaging movie about this? And then they sort of did it, just not all the way. Yeah, if you get rid of that stuff about Emile Zola, really, if you make Emile Zola a supporting character in this and make Dreyfus the main character, then I think you've got yourself a movie. As it was, I still think it's pretty good. I landed on 3.5 stars as well. I think Paul Mooney is very good in this. When you get past that first half hour, I mean, he's got some weird little comedic bits that were, I think, kind of awkward in the first.
What was that?
Yeah, that didn't really work. But yeah, once he really gets into the Dreyfus affair stuff, I think he's very good. And we'll revisit him later too. There's a movie called I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang that I picked for you that we'll revisit. So we'll see some more Paul Mooney later on too.
That's cool. There's a couple other versions of this story. I mean, we talked about the Officer and a Spy one, which I don't have such high hopes for. But there's a Jose Ferrer movie from the 50s that I might want to check out if I can find it anywhere. It's so under-reviewed on Letterboxd. But sometimes those are gems.
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole world seems afraid to tell this story.
I wonder why.
I gave you Make Way for Tomorrow, a movie I actually hadn't seen because I hadn't seen any movies from this year. And I had just heard it was incredible. And it was. Turns out it was.
I had never heard of this movie, and I'm I'm a movie buff, so I had not heard of this movie. Where did you come up with this?
Thank you, Letterboxd. It is, I believe, the highest rated movie of the year on Letterboxd. And for good reason, because it's out of this world incredible. It turns out that Make Way for Tomorrow is the inspiration for the Ozu movie Tokyo Story, which is one of the highest rated movies in all of Letterboxd. Both of those movies are on the Letterboxd top 250. So it was also nice. I watched both, and it was nice to knock two out from the Letterboxd Top 250. So this is a movie about, it's a Depression era story about a family who goes to see their parents in a little family reunion and learn that their parents have lost the family home to the bank. They just haven't been saving. The dad's like kind of a doofus, and it's the 30s, so it's stay-at-home mom. And now what to do with the parents? It's so funny because in this scene, this opening scene, it doesn't seem like the parents even thought about what's going to happen to them next. And
No.
it's up, and the kids are now deciding, well, who can they stay with? And none of the kids can have room for both of them, so they go and stay with two. They split them up, and each of them stay with a separate sibling as a sort of temporary situation, but make way for tomorrow because they don't fit in their kids' lives. And the movie is a pretty sobering look at how family values have changed and how there's no room for the elderly in the fast go-go world of these children. It seems like you liked it. Tell me more.
Yeah, I did. This movie kind of blew me away. And I'm watching it, and it unfolds a little bit slowly at first. Really, it plays a little, not goofy. Goofy's not the word I'm looking for. It's playing a little saccharine at first. I'm like, where I'm not quite sure how this is going to go. And again, unlike you, I hadn't researched it at all, so I didn't know like that it was ranked so highly in the Letterboxd, top 250. I was assuming it was good, because otherwise, why would you have recommended it? You're not going to recommend a movie that's poor. But again, I just had no background on this movie or what it was about. Although I'll tell a story in a little bit where I was like, okay, yes, I actually have heard of this movie, and I remembered it after I'd read the story. But the more the movie went on, it gets more engrossing, and more you attach to these characters more and more as the movie goes on. And part of what attached me to these characters is the way, not so much the way their kids react and treat them, because their kids, yeah, they don't fit in their kids' lives, but their kids, like, none of the kids are bad people, and they're not like mean to their, maybe one of them, yeah. Maybe one
of them's a real piece of work.
A piece of work, yeah. But the way that other people, treat the parents, like especially when they get to that final, that finals. I mean, yeah.
We'll talk about it.
We'll get to that. But just the sacrifices that these two characters make. I mean, yeah. I mean, us, we're 40. Our parents are, in their 70s or whatever. Like, I mean, how can you not think about, like, your parents? Like, what would happen? Like right now, if you had to take in one of your parents, like, could you do it? What would your life be like? And then you think about like I think, God, if I had to take in one of my parents right now, but like, how could I not take in one of my parents right now? They've done everything for me, like, and you have all these like complicated feelings about it. And the movie actually made me like really, think about it, like really, really think about these things and like what that would be like. And that was, it was an uncomfortable proposition, to think about, and what it would be like too, to have them be separated. I mean, what that would be like to be together for, 50 years, whatever. My parents have been married for 76. Yeah. I mean, they've been married for 48 years. And then like this couple, they had been together, married 50 years. And all of a sudden they're like, and back in that day, they probably hadn't spent a night apart, ever. And then all of a sudden they're ripped apart. And there's the one scene where I really picked up, latched in onto the movie was when the wife has that first phone call after when they're having the bridge lesson, and she picks up the phone and she talks to him, and they have this really, really sad discussion. All the people that are in the bridge lesson are sitting there listening to it, and it's just one of the saddest phone conversations you have ever heard in your life. And I'm like, oh, that's the kind of movie that this is going to be, and it is really, really sad. But there's a certain, I mean, there's a real beauty to it too. Yeah, this movie totally snuck up on me.
Where it got me, I had the exact same experience, except where it caught me was so you're talking about first, once they're separated, we focus on the grandmother living with her son and granddaughter and daughter-in-law, and they have a busy life. The daughter-in-law the granddaughter doesn't want to bring her friends over because her stuffy grandma is there now. And the daughter-in-law, because it's the Depression, needs to take on a second job. She teaches bridge lessons. And it just seems like mom is in the way. Grandma is in the way. And then we see the dad who's staying with one of his daughters because his other daughter is a real piece of garbage, and she married an even worse piece of garbage, and they won't take them in, even though they have room for both of them.
Yeah.
But the dad is staying with one of the nicer of the two daughters. And what got me was when he goes to the corner store and visits with Mr. Rubens, the guy who owns the store, who was played by Maurice Moscovitch, who was one of the guys in the Great Dictator, who was one of the friends of Charlie Chaplin in that movie. And he's great in The Great Dictator, and he's even better in this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, their friendship. First off, I'm such a sucker for two old dudes movies. I watched all these Walter Matthau movies. I have a list on Letterboxd called Old Bros, just about when are there movies about two old guys or three old guys just hanging out. And this movie almost is an Old Bros movie. We just don't get quite enough of Victor Moore and Moscovitch together. But yeah, this scene where, you know, they're just wondering, like, did we do the right thing? They both made two very different decisions about how to raise their kids. Victor Moore's character, Barkley has decided to keep his family relatively close, and he still gets together with them, and he's relying on them. And Moscovich's character is clearly, immigrant from Eastern Europe. Given the time, he's probably escaping Hitler.
He's Jewish. I mean, yeah.
Oh, he's overtly Jewish. This movie is so much better than The Life of Emile Zola in every way. Yeah, he's overtly Jewish. They have this great, and he has left his children behind. And he thinks that children are meant to leave and you can't rely on them. And so he has done it differently. He has not retired. He stayed in his job. He's still working. He and his wife work very hard, but that's the cost for him of his independence in his old age. And what got me was after Bark leaves the store after a beautiful interaction between the two of them, like a beautiful meeting between the two of them. And it's not perfect. There's some Jewish stereotyping going on with the character of
1937. Yeah.
He is frisking a little boy to make sure he didn't steal anything from the counter. But then, like, he wants the little boy to be happy, whatever. But he goes back and he looks at his wife, and his wife is like fat and kind of mean, and he loves her so much. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so in the bag for this.
I wrote that down because she's like, what do you want? He goes, I just wanted to look at you. Oh. And like that yeah.
It's amazing. So later in the movie, and we're going to be spoiling this entire movie. Later in the movie, Bark gets sick. He gets a cold. It's not a big deal, but he gets a cold and it lasts longer than he's used to. And he's being a real baby about it. Like he's being like a real bitch. And he's driving his daughter crazy. And a doctor comes, and he's a nice doctor, but Bark doesn't trust a young doctor. Like, Bark is really his own worst enemy here. He's just crapping on the doctor in front of him, to the point where the daughter is looking for any reason to get rid of her dad. And she sort of not tricks, but like skews what the doctor says to her to mean to say, oh, he needs to go stay in a warmer climate. Everyone's in New York or the East Coast right now. Mm-hmm. He needs to go stay in a warmer climate out in California, where the one daughter who we don't see lives. And before that happens, the shopkeeper comes over to give him soup. And she's so mad because what does that mean about her cooking that he brought her soup? And she insults him, and he goes, look, you can insult me, but this soup is my wife. Don't you dare insult my wife. Like, he's so good. He's so good. Oh, I loved him. And that was the last we saw of him, because this leads to, while they're trying to get the dad, and really probably the mom too, to go to California, the bridge couple, the son and his wife who plays bridge, are looking at a woman's home for the mom. And it's becoming clear that the mom and the dad are not going to be living together anymore. And the more that starts to sink in, the more dread. Like, there's a real sense of, oh my God, there's a real apocalypse happening here in this family. But then it becomes a different movie, because when that decision is made, they get their last day together. And we spend a good 30 minutes of the movie of them spending their last day together in New York City, sort of reliving their honeymoon and just enjoying each other's company. Good Lord. Like, it's crazy what they... First off, let's keep in mind that we just called the grandfather character a bitch. He's being like a real baby. The last time we've seen him, he's not sympathetic. He's being annoying and a baby. And the mom is kind of annoying and in the way. And there's this like kind of not meaningless, but a little hard to follow subplot, because they couldn't really tell us what happened because of when this came out, about the granddaughter getting in trouble with a boy, and the mom knew about it, or the grandma knew about it, but didn't tell anyone. So they're ready to put her in a home. So we're not like feeling super sympathetic about these two. And I dare any single person on earth to watch this 30 minutes of movie and not think, these kids are the worst people on the planet. It's incredible. Do you need a minute?
Yeah, I might. It's just a really powerful, just the escalation of everything to do. And there's only one character, whoever says that, like, oh yeah, you guys are, everyone else is like, oh yeah, you guys will be together. This is all temporary. This is all temporary. And it's only the granddaughter, the very young granddaughter's like, Grandma, you're like, you are fooling yourself. Like, this is never going to happen. Like, Grandpa's not going to get it. He's not going to get a job. You guys aren't going to live together again. And the grandma's like, isn't it, but I just kind of wanted to pretend for a while. Or she says something like that. I can't remember exactly what the line.
That's exactly it.
But there's still part of me that kept thinking like, okay, well, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. And then, again, spoiler alert, they get to the end of their day together, and he gets on the train to California. Bye.
Right. And the most brutal line in the movie is right before that, where he says, Oh, I don't know if I can say it. If he says, "If I never see you again," and she gets upset, and he's so good because he knows how to respond. He says, "Well, the train could hop off the tracks," as if that's any better. But him making a joke is, of course, better. They don't make movies like this.
They don't. No, I'm not even sure they made movies like this then.
I don't know that you could. It's really it's one of the most emotionally impactful without being saccharine or emotive or dramatic. It just feels natural. It helps a little bit that right before this, they're in a cab and he sings "Let Me Be My Sweetheart" to you, which is a jaunty song, but it's just like what's coming or what could come. And at the end of the movie, it is left ambiguous because we have no idea what happens, but it's impossible to end this movie and think they ever saw each other again. I think it's one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's a remarkable movie, and really for the director who made it too. I made some notes about Leo McCarey is the name of the director, and he did movies like Duck Soup and An Affair to Remember and Going My Way, and all these movies that are not at all like Make Way for Tomorrow. And the story that I remember now, I think Bogdanovich told this story because he was a Leo McCarey fan. I'd have to look this up. So I read this in Roger Ebert's review of Make Way for Tomorrow, and apparently he got this story from Bogdanovich. But Leo McCarey actually won Best Director in 1937.
I know this story.
Yeah, the year that Make Way for Tomorrow came out, he won Best Director for a movie called The Awful Truth. And apparently when they awarded him the Oscar for Best Director, he's like, you gave it to me for the wrong movie. And having not seen The Awful Truth, I still think it's okay to say he's probably right.
Yeah, absolutely. So the studio did not want this ending at all. They didn't want this movie. They were like, this is too sad. What are you doing?
Yeah.
He was doing the right thing. And this movie was not well received. And it didn't get nominated for an Oscar. It had been completely forgotten. And even now that it's in the Criterion Collection, it's still quite hard to find.
Yeah, it's not like the DVD. You can find the DVD and the Blu-ray for like a reasonable like $15-20 or whatever. But yeah, it's not streaming anywhere, which I think is insane.
I'm with you. It's so good.
There was it's another movie we talked about a little bit. So it was selected by the National Film Preservation Board, and in 1937 it did make the National Board of Review top 10, so at least it was recognized there, but that's really the only recognition that it got, which is just insane.
Well, Let Me Be My Sweetheart, which had already been a song for 27 years by the time this movie came out, has also been recognized by with the music version of the National Film Registry. It has been cited as being culturally relevant and significant.
Yes.
So yeah, just like a lot of things. And also, like we mentioned, Yasujiro Ozu saw this, loved it, thought it resonated a lot with Japanese culture, and made Tokyo Story, which is even if you can believe it, to pay homage to the ailing David Lynch. If you can believe it, an even smaller and more intimate version of this story where two old folks go to visit their grandkids in Tokyo. So I'm not going to say too much about it because I know you didn't get a chance to watch Tokyo Story, but I'll just say also great. It was at the time not released in the United States at the same time because it was seen as too Japanese, and having seen it, it's very Japanese.
Yeah.
It is not particularly accessible to an American audience. It's also like, it doesn't move. It's very slow. Funny enough, the director Kogo Nada, that's obviously not his real name. He got that name from the writer of Tokyo Story, Kogo Noda. And it was actually Kogo Noda who saw Make Way for Tomorrow and wrote Tokyo Story. So we did our After Yang episode, and between that and Columbus, which are the two Kogo Nada features we've seen, he owes a lot to Ozu movies. And also so does Wes Anderson. Like, Wes Anderson doesn't exist without Yasujiro Ozu. And I had never seen an Ozu film before. So it was cool to watch Tokyo Story in that regard and be like, oh, I'm watching a Japanese Wes Anderson movie. But it's very slow. But it's also, the story's different, but you get the same, like, these kids do not deserve these parents. And I actually think one of the kids in Tokyo Story is one of the most villainous characters I've ever seen in a movie. And she doesn't do anything like vile or evil, but just like the way she treats her parents, I'm like, I just hate her. And there is a character who calls her out in the movie, so that's satisfying.
Yeah.
But definitely tonight, fire up Criterion Channel and watch that.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that we've both wiped our noses, why don't we talk about where these movies sit in our top 10 of the decade, or our rankings of the decade?
Well, I have a top 20 of the 1930s. I've seen actually over 30 movies or over 20 movies of the decade. So I do have a top 20, and Life of Emile Zola before this rewatch was in that. It was in the I think it was number 14 or 15. I had it in my top 20, but on this rewatch it fell out. I had it ranked higher before, but this time I knocked it down to 3.5 stars. So it's out of the top 20, just outside of the top 20. Like I said, I do think it's good, just not great. So it's out of the top 20 now. Make Way for Tomorrow is ranked number 3 in my top 20, and I feel like maybe I underrated it. The 2 movies that are above it are Fritz Lang's M and Chaplin's Modern Times.
I think that's pretty fair. Now, okay, so I have in my top 18, Life of Emile Zola is like near the bottom. It's 18, 17, 16, 15. It's number 14 between Sons of the Desert and King Kong, which I think is a good place for it in terms of my stuff. And I have Make Way for Tomorrow as number 1 with a bullet. I think if I were to do like a top 50 movies of all time, Make Way for Tomorrow easily gets in there. And I have it right above Modern Times, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and M. Those are like my top 4 right now. So it was pretty similar. And we'll cover Mr. Smith Goes to Washington on this podcast
good.
Before too long.
How have I never seen that?
I don't know. You'd never seen Make Way for Tomorrow either.
Insane.